This is Third Paradigm, and I'm Teresa Carraggio. Buckminster Fuller said, "You can never change anything by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete." So today I'm going to be talking about my favorite topic. I know that I said that that was ultimate reality, but today I'm going to tie the two together because I'm going to talk about how to build a new economic system. And I'll begin by talking about the spiritual and metaphysical obstacles to building a new system. And those are things that you can control in yourself. Then I'm going to talk about the principles, 10 principles that are universal to building a different system, because I'm talking to a global audience, and so everyone has a different manifestation of that. Then I'll talk about the 3 different areas that we in the US would be looking at in order to apply those universal principles. And I think there are similar things that can be applied in other places. Let's get started. Let's begin with the spiritual. There is one certain way that you can reduce the suffering in the world. Refuse to do your part. You don't need to accept suffering as what you owe. That I've mentioned that I've studied A Course in Miracles for a couple of decades, and one of the things that it says is that suffering and self-sacrifice are ways in which we impose guilt on others, that we tie them to us with a debt of guilt by our own suffering. Now, I don't think you should be one of those obnoxious people who goes around saying, well, you're choosing to have cancer. You are choosing to be homeless, to be poor. All of these things are things that you could be doing differently. That would be horrible. What we need to do, I think, is to look at those people and say, they're working out a piece of the puzzle that I don't have to deal with. And so I should be grateful to them because they're figuring out that part. But at the same time, I'm not going to accept any of the guilt that is part of that relationship. I will be grateful to them, but I will not accept guilt as my share of that suffering, because when you suffer, all you do is make suffering more. In our looking at a new system, not taking on guilt is a big part of it, because if we have a system that says these people are victims, these people are perpetrators, we need to make sure that the perpetrators pay. All we're doing is shifting around the burden. We're not proliferating. We're not saying, here, I have joy and I want everyone to have the joy that I have. That's the kind of system that we're trying to build. Now let's talk about the obstacles that are metaphysical. I know that for myself, in the world pre-GPS, whenever I was lost, which was often, my tendency was to go faster. I just wanted to get out of that situation, and I thought, well, if I just get a little faster, I'll get to something that I recognize. But it doesn't work that way. It really requires stopping, evaluating, and turning. And once you make that turn, the first step is the hardest, but every step beyond that feels good because you get that reinforcement that, yes, I am going the right way. And in our case, the idea is, are we working alone, or is there something that we're working with that wants us to get to that point? Are we actually one? In which case, the more that we can give others the benefit of the doubt, the more that we're going to be encouraged. So whenever we feel hopeless or despairing or just angry about this idea that, well, we can't change the system, that's way too big, I think we need to check our privilege in terms of, checking our sense of superiority, because the only reason that that wouldn't work is if we're better than everyone else. So by giving others the benefit of the doubt, the reward to that is that you don't just have hope, you know that it's inevitable that this is going to work out. Now let's look at the 10 universal principles of an economic system. Number 1, economics is governance. You can't separate the two. Governance is the brain saying, what do we want to do with our labor and our assets? Economics is the heart. It is what pumps that energy into every part of the body that helps get that done, that enables that to get done. So you can't have a brain that's deciding here's what we want to do and not have the heart that says here's how we get it done. Number 2, the work of life is maintenance. It is feeding the soft, hungry body, maintaining the health of the body, maintaining the health of children and the family, maintaining the relationships with family, with community, with neighbors. It is maintaining the home and taking care of the property, maintaining the health of the soil, the water, and the air, maintaining the infrastructure of our communities. These are the things that you need to make sure that your baseline is set, that you are keeping things as they are before you can start building on them. And that's the work that our economy doesn't reward at all. So that's what we need to change in order to acknowledge that that's the real work of life, not building computer apps. Number 3, wealth is security and control over your own life. Number 4, the purpose of local government is to protect and proliferate the wealth of families and neighborhoods. The purpose of federal governments is to protect and proliferate the wealth of communities. Number 5, wealth as defined by the United Nations is natural, physical, and human. The natural capital is the land and the water and the air, the health of the soil, the health of the forest. And the physical capital is the infrastructure. It's the built wealth. It is the homes in particular. It's the businesses. It's all of the things that service those. And then the human capital is not the people, but is the knowledge and skills and creativity of the people. Number 6, the intergenerational transfer of wealth incurs a debt to society. Now, this is primarily the mortgage, that the houses are already built and someone shouldn't have to save for 30 years in order to live in a home that they're taking responsibility for. But at the same time, they shouldn't just be able to move in and say the debt stops here. So having a mortgage that allows you to live in a home while you are returning that debt is something that makes sense. The student loan could fall into this category too, but I'm not certain whether education is wasted on the young and whether that's something we should be doing in a different way where it doesn't incur a debt for learning before you are giving back, or whether those two things should be intertwined as a lifetime endeavor. Number 7, that debt is paid both forwards and backwards. It's paid backwards in terms of making sure the previous generation is able to live out their lives in dignity and with gratitude. And it's paid forward in passing the gift on to the next generation in a better form. Number 8, in order to facilitate this intergenerational transfer of wealth, every community needs to be the default owner of all of the assets within its borders. That means that when something transfers from one generation to another, the community is the only one who can issue the debt for that. And that means that they can also issue the credit to pay back the debt, which we're going to be talking about more. Number 9, the success or failure of a local government can be measured by how much they increase or decrease the local ownership. So something like the Great Reset, where you will own nothing and be happy, would be 100% failure. Something where every person has the ability to own their own home and own their own labor through owning a small business would be 100% success. And to end with number 10, the amount of money in your community matters less than the range of disparity in terms of happiness. So if the amount of money is matching the cost of living in terms of the essentials and in terms of debt, then people are going to be able to find a way to make a living without a lot of problems. But if there's a wide discrepancy, then there is unfairness. So if you can have some discrepancy so that there's room for people to work hard to be successful, but without taking that away from anyone else, that's what you're aiming for. And I'll close by looking at how these logistics would apply in the United States. And that's how I end my book, How to Dismantle an Empire. There are 3 things that would need to be transferred simultaneously to communities, which is debt creation through banking and mortgages, the money creation through a local credit backed by those mortgages, and then taxation of that credit. So not necessarily taxation of dollars, but taxation of the money that is created through those mortgages and is backed by local community labor. In a future episode, I'll go into more detail on the logistics, how I tie in the Social Security Trust Fund as a way of capitalizing these banks, why it's so important that banks locally owned are the only ones that can create credit out of nothing, and how I would tax what I call community carrots and distribute them in order to enhance the amount of productivity and proliferate the wealth. In the meantime, in preparation for that, I recommend that you watch these 2 videos. This is Adjacent Nation on Crystal Ball, and it looks at how we can form local communities and what we want to enhance. And then this one, which is Be the Meanest Mom Ever, Your Kids Will Thank You Eventually. And that goes into the principles of good governance and how they relate to parenting. You should prove yourself as governing a family and having kids who are an asset to your life and your household before you think about governing any bigger than that. Thank you, and please subscribe. And check this out on Substack, where it will have all of the text and the links. Thank you.